Welcome back to BIM Heroes Radio. This is Episode 4.
Ooh, Episode 4 already.
I know, right? Time flies when you're having fun
and learning about leadership.
Exactly. So this one is all about decision-making and problem-solving. Perfect timing, too.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it aligns perfectly with Week 4 of the BIMHero.io Leadership Development Program.
Ah, of course. Making the right call, it really is the heart of leadership, isn't it? Especially in the AEC world.
You got it. And luckily, we've got some amazing insights from the BIM Heroes community. They've been sharing their wisdom, their experiences, their tips and tricks, all about navigating those tricky decisions.
Always love tapping into that collective wisdom.
Me too. So this week, we're diving deep into 6 core themes, kind of like the pillars of decision-making. We'll be looking at the decision-making process itself, how our brains work, the tools and techniques we can use. Then there's creative problem solving.
That's a good one. Never enough creativity.
Absolutely. Then we'll tackle assessing and managing risk, because that's always lurking. And we'll explore how to deal with ambiguity. Because let's face it, the AEC world is rarely black and white.
It's a world of shades of gray, for sure.
And last but not least, we'll look at how groups make decisions, because it's rarely a solo act.
True. A lot to unpack.
It is. But don't worry, we have some awesome guides for this journey. Larry Bridgesmith, Maulik Gangani, Neil O'Reilly, Nicoleta Panagiotidou, and Viktoria Roy, all amazing leaders in the AEC space.
I've heard of a few of those names, looking forward to hearing their insights. So where do we start?
Let's kick things off with Larry Bridgesmith.
Okay, Larry Bridgesmith.
He's the executive director at Guardrail Technologies, and he brings a fascinating perspective to the table.
What's his specialty?
Neuroscience.
Ooh, interesting. The brain and decision-making.
Exactly. He draws on the work of Daniel Kahneman, thinking fast and slow.
Oh, yeah, the 2 systems of thinking. System 1, all gut feeling, intuition. System 2, the slow, deliberate thinker.
Right. And Kahneman found that we often think we're using that deliberate system, but in reality,
we're on autopilot more often than we realize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does Bridgesmith apply this to leadership?
Well, he highlights this interesting point. When we're under pressure, like in a conflict situation.
Ooh, yeah, those tough moments.
We tend to lean heavily on subconscious patterns, things we've learned from past experiences.
We fall back on what we know, even if it's not the best approach.
Exactly. He even suggests that less than 2% of our thinking happens in the prefrontal cortex during these moments. That part of the brain associated with logic, reasoning.
So we're running on instinct, not logic.
Pretty much. It's like we're reacting based on old scripts, not really objectively assessing the situation.
Wow, that's a bit unsettling, especially for leaders who are expected to make sound decisions under pressure.
Definitely raises some red flags. We might be making decisions that feel right based on past experience, but might not be the best choice for the current challenge.
So how do we, as leaders, become more aware of those patterns and make more conscious decisions, especially when the heat is on?
Well, Bridgesmith introduces this concept called bounded rationality.
Bounded rationality.
It basically acknowledges that we have limitations when making decisions.
We're not all knowing supercomputers.
Exactly. We're always dealing with incomplete information, time constraints, and our own cognitive limits.
So even with the best intentions, we can't possibly analyze every single detail or predict every possible outcome.
We have to make peace with that. And actually, that's a good reminder to be kinder to ourselves. We're doing the best we can with the resources we have.
I like that. Self-compassion and leadership. And it also highlights the importance of building systems and processes that help us make the best choices possible within those limitations.
Exactly. Systems thinking is crucial here. But to add another layer of complexity, Bridgesmith brings emotions into the mix.
Emotions, always stirring things up.
He argues that emotions are not irrational, but they're a form of experiential thinking. They're based on our past experiences, our interactions with the world.
So our feelings are valuable data points.
Exactly. They tell us something about how we perceive and react to situations. The key is to understand that they're part of the equation, not a distraction from it.
How do we, as leaders, manage that emotional data to make better decisions?
Self-awareness is key. Recognizing our own emotional triggers, how they might be clouding our judgment, maybe practicing some mindfulness or seeking feedback from trusted colleagues.
So it's about acknowledging our feelings, not suppressing them.
Right. Now, there's another layer to consider. Heuristics and biases. Those mental shortcuts our brains use, often without us even realizing it.
We did a deep dive on cognitive biases a while back.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating how our brains try to simplify things, but sometimes those shortcuts lead us astray.
Exactly. Bridgesmith specifically mentions negativity bias, that tendency to focus on the negative.
The glass half empty syndrome.
And confirmatory bias, where we favor information that supports our existing beliefs, even if it's not accurate.
We see what we want to see.
Unfortunately, yes. And these biases can really trip us up, especially when making important decisions. So how do we overcome them? Bridgesmith advocates for creating an environment where diverse perspectives are welcomed and encouraged.
Diversity of thought is so crucial. Surrounding ourselves with people who see things differently challenge our assumptions.
Exactly. He also highlights the danger of pluralistic ignorance. That's where people stay silent because they assume everyone else agrees, even if they don't.
Oh, I've seen that happen. No one wants to rock the boat, so everyone just go along with it, even if they have doubts.
And that can lead to decisions that no one actually supports, but everyone just goes along with it out of fear or conformity.
It's like the emperor's new clothes. No one wants to be the one to point out the obvious problem. So how can leaders encourage people to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable?
Psychological safety is key. Creating a culture where people feel comfortable expressing dissenting opinions without fear of retribution or judgment.
Making it safe to disagree, that's so important.
And it goes beyond just tolerating dissent. It's about actively seeking out those different viewpoints, creating a space where people feel valued for their unique perspectives.
Because when we have that diversity of thought, we can make much better decisions as a team.
Absolutely. Bridgesmith also suggests that establishing clear processes and guidelines can help. For example, explicitly stating how decisions will be made, encouraging open dialogue, setting ground rules for respectful communication.
Having those structures in place can make it easier to navigate disagreements and arrive at solutions that everyone can support. So we've gotten a really good understanding of the individual decision-making process from Bridgesmith. But how does all of this play out in a group setting?
That's where he emphasizes the power of collective intelligence, that idea that groups can be smarter than the sum of their parts. Innovation comes from harnessing the diverse knowledge and experiences of everyone on the team.
It's about tapping into that collective wisdom.
Exactly. He even suggests a really cool exercise, having teams reflect on the best functioning teams they've ever been a part of. What were the common traits? What made them so effective?
That's interesting. It's like reverse engineering success.
Exactly. By identifying those patterns, those elements that contribute to high performance, teams can start to establish working norms for their own group. They can create a blueprint for success.
And ultimately, Bridgesmith stresses the crucial role of the leader in fostering that environment. They need to create a space where diverse opinions are genuinely welcomed, where disagreements are seen as opportunities for growth, and where consensus is achieved through collaboration, not coercion. That's a pretty inspiring vision of leadership.
It is. Now, would you like to explore a different perspective on decision-making?
Absolutely.
Wait.
Let's shift gears a bit and hear from Maulik Gangani.
Okay, Maulik Gangani.
He's a senior BIM expert at Tata Consulting Engineers. And he brings kind of a more holistic, even philosophical view of decision-making. I think you'll appreciate his insights. I love that. Decision-making as a philosophy, it's not just about, ticking boxes or following procedures. It's about understanding those deeper principles at play.
Right, it's a mindset. So what are some of the key things he emphasizes?
Well, he starts by highlighting the importance of having a clear vision.
Okay, vision.
He sees it as the guiding light. It helps leaders align their decisions with their overall goals, their values, everything they're trying to achieve.
Like a compass pointing you in the right direction.
Exactly. Without that clear sense of where you're headed, it's so easy to get lost in the weeds, Make decisions that don't actually move you closer to your ultimate goals.
Been there, done that. So vision is essential. What else?
He also talks about the importance of constant learning, gathering information.
Lifelong learning, right?
He believes that truly effective leaders are incredibly curious. They're always seeking out different perspectives, insights, constantly expanding their knowledge base to make more informed decisions.
Especially in a field like AEC, where things are always changing, new technologies, new ways of doing things. Staying curious is essential.
Absolutely. And once you've gathered that information, Gangani says it's crucial to carefully evaluate the different alternatives. Embrace complexity, welcome different viewpoints, really weigh the pros and cons of each option before making a choice.
Not rushing into a decision, taking the time to explore all the possibilities.
Precisely. It helps avoid those costly mistakes, and it can often lead to more innovative solutions too.
Makes sense. So gather information, explore options, anything else.
And this is where Gangani introduces a really interesting element, the balance between rationality and intuition.
Okay, that's intriguing. Logic versus gut feeling.
He believes that the best leaders are able to blend both. That logical reasoning, but also that gut feeling that comes from experience, from wisdom.
It's not about choosing one over the other, it's about integrating both.
Exactly. Like, intuition can alert you to red flags that logic might miss. But logic can help you avoid impulsive decisions based solely on gut feeling.
They work together, so how do you strike that balance?
Gangani doesn't really offer a specific formula, but I think it's about being aware of both, paying attention to the data, but also tuning into your instincts, trusting your experience.
Interesting. Now, every decision involves some level of risk, right?
Of course. And Gangani acknowledges that. He actually encourages leaders to be courageous, to take calculated risks.
Calculated risks, yes. Not just jumping into the unknown blindly.
Exactly. But he also stresses the importance of considering the potential consequences.
So being bold but not reckless.
Right. Weighing those potential rewards against the potential downsides and making informed choices that align with your overall vision and values. Which brings us back to the importance of that clear vision.
It all connects. Now, what about the role of others in decision-making?
Gangani echoes Bridgesmith on that point. He emphasizes the importance of collaboration and inclusivity. The best decisions are made when everyone feels empowered to contribute, share their perspectives, their expertise.
Collective intelligence at work.
Absolutely. It's not about the leader being the hero making all the calls. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels like their voice matters and decisions are made collectively. So we've heard from Bridgesmith and Gangani, both offering some great insights into the decision-making process. But now I'm curious to hear about more specific tools and techniques that leaders can use.
Okay, I like that. Let's get practical. Who are we turning to for that? Well, for that, let's turn to Neil O'Reilly.
Okay, Neil O'Reilly.
He's the Director of Digital Delivery at Egis in the UK.
Got it.
And he really gets into the nitty-gritty of decision-making tools and techniques, practical strategies that leaders can use.
I love that. Practical advice. Always helpful. So what does O'Reilly have to offer?
Well, he starts off by challenging a very common approach. Consensus seeking.
Oh, interesting. Consensus. That's usually seen as a positive thing, right? Getting everyone on board.
You'd think so. But O'Reilly argues that striving for complete agreement, it can often lead to watered-down solutions, compromises that nobody's truly happy with.
I've definitely seen that happen. You end up with the lowest common denominator. But isn't consensus important for getting buy-in from the team?
He acknowledges that. Buy-in is important. But he suggests that it shouldn't come at the expense of finding the best solution.
So how do you balance those two things? Buy-in and the best solution.
It's a tricky one. He's observed that sometimes decisions made under pressure, when there's no time for endless debate, can actually be surprisingly effective.
Really? So sometimes a bit of pressure can be a good thing.
It can help cut through the noise and force you to focus on what really matters. But of course, you still want to make sound decisions, even when you're under the gun.
Absolutely. So how do you ensure that?
O'Reilly stresses the importance of having a clear understanding of your goals, your priorities, what's truly important. When you have that, it's easier to make those quick decisions that align with your goals, even in a high-pressure situation.
It's about having that strong inner compass that guides you.
Exactly. And the more experience you have making decisions, the better equipped you'll be to make those sound judgments quickly. It's like building up that decision-making muscle memory.
Practice makes perfect, or at least better. So what about specific tools?
Well, O'Reilly introduces the decision tree. Have you ever used one of those?
I've seen them before. It's basically a visual tool, right? Like a flow chart, but for decision-making.
Exactly. It helps you map out the different scenarios, actions, potential outcomes. It can be really helpful to visualize the different paths you could take.
And anticipate those consequences.
Right. He also points out that using a decision tree can force you to define your criteria for making a decision, your rules. That can help reduce ambiguity and bias, make the process a bit more objective.
So it's not just about brainstorming different possibilities. It's about setting clear parameters for how you'll evaluate those possibilities.
Exactly. Now, he cautions against getting stuck in consensus seeking, but he still emphasizes the importance of getting input from others, especially those who can contribute meaningfully to the decision. It's not about pleasing everyone. It's about gathering those diverse perspectives.
It's quality over quantity, getting the right input from the right people.
Exactly. He emphasizes seeking input from those with in-depth knowledge, expertise, those closest to the problem. Sometimes the people on the front lines, they have the most valuable insights.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are actually doing the work, seeing the challenges firsthand.
And he even suggests reaching out to third parties, industry bodies, if needed, to get that additional guidance.
It's a good reminder that we don't always have to have all the answers ourselves. Sometimes it's essential to tap into that external expertise. So we've gathered information, we've considered different perspectives. What's next?
Well, O'Reilly stresses the importance of identifying the root cause of the problem you're trying to solve, not just treating symptoms, but really getting to the heart of the issue.
Right, because you can put Band-Aids on problems, but if you don't address that underlying cause, they'll just keep coming back.
Exactly. He's a big believer in developing a plan, a clear plan, to address that root cause. Not just for solving the immediate problem, but also for knowledge sharing, preventing the same issue from popping up again in the future.
So it's about turning those oops moments into learning opportunities, building a more resilient organization. I love that. What else does he highlight?
Accountability. He's a firm believer in it. Even after you've gathered all the feedback, all the input, the leader ultimately needs to own the decision, be willing to stand behind their choice.
Taking responsibility. That's a true mark of leadership.
He also stresses having a holistic view, thinking broadly about all the potential impacts of a decision, considering the budget, resources, time, quality, customer experience. It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Understanding those ripple effects, how a decision in one area might impact other areas.
And then he brings up another important point: balancing short-term and long-term value. He warns against getting too focused on those immediate gains, at the expense of those strategic long-term considerations.
It's easy to get caught up in that need for instant results, but sometimes that can undermine your long-term goals.
Right. He emphasizes that the earlier in your leadership journey you can learn to incorporate that balance, the better equipped you'll be, making decisions that benefit both the present and the future, thinking about the legacy you're creating.
That's a powerful perspective. So, anything else from O'Reilly?
One last thing: communication. He wraps up his discussion with a reminder about how crucial communication is for effective decision-making.
Okay, communication. That's a recurring theme in leadership.
It is. He believes it's vital that everyone is aligned on the outcome of the decision and that they understand the rationale behind it.
So even if not everyone was involved in the actual decision-making process, they need to know why the decision was made and what it means for them.
Exactly. It's about transparency, clarity. It's about ensuring that shared understanding, which is so important for smooth implementation and buy-in.
Makes sense. When people feel like they're in the loop, they're much more likely to be supportive. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Anything else we should touch on?
Actually, there's one more big topic: risk management.
Risk management. That's a whole world in itself. What insights do our BIM heroes have to offer on this one?
Well, we can go back to Neil O'Reilly for his perspective.
Okay, back to Neil.
Remember, he's the director of digital delivery at Egis in the UK, so he's got a lot of experience navigating the complexities of risk. He kicks things off by acknowledging that risk management, it's a huge topic, but he manages to distill it down to some key things that every leader should be aware of. Ready for a crash course in risk management.
Hit me with it. What are the most important elements?
He starts with identification. You can't manage risks if you don't know what they are.
Makes sense. So how do you go about identifying those potential risks?
He emphasizes the importance of conducting a thorough review involving a wide range of stakeholders to get different perspectives. And he highlights a risk that's often overlooked: reputational risk.
Oh, that's a big one. Reputation is so valuable.
Absolutely. It can be easily damaged if risks aren't carefully considered and managed. So he stresses the importance of proactively addressing potential reputational risks, especially in today's world where information spreads so quickly.
Okay, so we've identified the risks. What's next?
Evaluation. Assessing the likelihood, the severity, the potential recurrence of each risk. He suggests categorizing risks, low, medium, high, to prioritize them and to allocate resources accordingly.
It's about focusing your energy where it's needed most.
Exactly. And then he gets into change management, how you respond to risks once they've been identified and evaluated.
Change management, always a tricky one. What's his take on it?
He stresses having a clear process for clarifying the impact of those risks, documenting any necessary changes to plans or procedures, and of course, open and transparent communication is key.
Keeping everyone in the loop.
Exactly. Then he moves on to ongoing review and monitoring. Risk management isn't a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process.
Always staying vigilant.
He's a big fan of using dashboards to visualize risk data, track trends, identify problems early on.
Dashboards are great for that big picture view. Anything else?
He talks about cultivating a strong risk management culture. It's not just about having policies, it's about making risk management part of your organizational DNA.
Everyone being aware of it, taking ownership.
He also mentions that there are many risk management frameworks out there. Choose one that aligns with your organization's needs and adapt it. One size doesn't fit all.
Got it. So what's the key takeaway when it comes to risk management?
Continuous improvement. Constantly be reviewing your processes, learning from your experiences, staying up to date with new technologies and trends, refining your approach.
Always evolving.
Exactly. He even gives a whole list of practical strategies for continuous improvement, optimizing processes, encouraging knowledge sharing, identifying blind spots, tracking performance, upskilling your organization, recognizing cause and effect, conducting audits, encouraging feedback, staying ahead of the curve. He's got a lot of passion for this topic.
It sounds like it. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from individual decision-making to group dynamics, risk management, anything else we should explore.
There is one more crucial aspect, dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty.
I used to think those were just inevitable parts of life, especially in a field as complex as AEC. But I'm starting to see them as challenges that can be actively managed. Who are we hearing from on this?
Let's tap into the wisdom of Paul Ransley. He's an experienced asset manager, and he offers some really interesting insights on navigating ambiguity and uncertainty.
Asset management, that's all about making decisions in the face of incomplete information, right?
Right.
Long-term planning, when you can't predict everything.
Exactly. He starts by reminding us that even with the best planning, the best risk mitigation, there is always that element of the unknown. We can't predict the future with 100% certainty.
So it's about being comfortable with that, making decisions even when you don't have all the answers.
Right. He challenges us to think about how often we truly acknowledge ambiguity and uncertainty. Are we just accepting it? Or are we actively trying to understand it, manage it?
It's a good question to ask ourselves. Are we doing enough?
He believes that we should embed the management of ambiguity and uncertainty into our management systems, just like any other risk, providing guidance, training, building processes,
Equipping people with the tools they need.
And to help us understand different approaches, he gives a quick overview of two popular frameworks. The VUCA framework, which we touched on earlier.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, those forces that shape our world.
Exactly. And then there's the Cinefin framework. It's a decision-making framework that helps categorize problems and choose an approach based on the level of complexity and predictability. It talks about different domains like obvious, complicated, complex, chaotic, disorder.
So it's recognizing that not all problems are created equal.
Right. You need different tools, different approaches, depending on the nature of the challenge. So any practical tips for dealing with all this uncertainty?
I'm all ears. What does Ransley recommend?
First, use the information you already have. Make it visible, accessible, use it in your decision-making processes.
Sometimes the answers are right there in front of us.
Then monitor those VUCA factors: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Track trends, see how they're changing.
Stay informed, adapt as needed.
He suggests a VUCA dashboard for visualizing those trends. Then he emphasizes systems thinking again. Understanding how things work, seeing the interconnectedness, recognizing those ripple effects.
Systems thinking is so crucial for leaders.
He also suggests characterizing projects based on their VUCA characteristics and then applying appropriate risk management techniques.
So tailoring your approach to the situation.
Right. He also encourages documenting uncertainty, assumptions, variability, making those unknowns explicit.
Shining a light on those blind spots.
He acknowledges the challenge of time constraints. Decision-making is often a balancing act.
Trying to get all the information you need while also making decisions under pressure.
And to help with that, he suggests using a framework inspired by Donald Rumsfeld's famous quote about known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns.
Ah, that's a classic. It's a way to categorize information, acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, what we know, what we need to find out, what we don't even know we don't know.
Exactly. So that's a lot to digest when it comes to ambiguity and uncertainty. Ready for one final topic?
Bring it on.
Group decision-making.
Group dynamics. That can be a whole other layer of complexity. It can be incredibly powerful when it works well, but can also be a recipe for disaster if it's not handled carefully. Who are we turning to for insights on this one?
Let's hear from Viktoria Roy. She's Associate Director and Group BIM Lead at Reddy Architecture plus Urbanism. She has some really fascinating ideas about how to leverage group intelligence to make better decisions.
Excellent. I'm eager to hear what she has to say. What's her starting point?
Well, she starts by exploring different leadership styles: autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, transformational, transactional, servant leadership. And she looks at how those different styles can impact group decision-making.
So many leadership styles. It's a good reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The best style depends on the situation, the team, the leader's personality. And being aware of your own leadership style, how it might influence group dynamics, that's crucial.
She also highlights the many benefits of group decision-making when it's done well: diverse perspectives, increased creativity, improved problem-solving, better decisions, increased acceptance and commitment from the team, stronger relationships, valuable learning opportunities, more effective change management, a lot of positives.
It sounds like it, but I'm sure it's not always a smooth process. What are some of the challenges?
She introduces this fascinating concept, the iceberg of ignorance. Have you heard of that?
The iceberg of ignorance. That sounds a bit ominous. What is it?
It's the idea that those higher up in an organization, they often have less understanding of the current situation than those on the front lines. The people doing the work, they have a clearer picture of what's really going on.
The further you get from the action, the less you know.
Exactly. And that can lead to some pretty bad decisions, especially if leaders aren't actively seeking input from those who are closer to the work. So how do we avoid this iceberg of ignorance?
I'm guessing communication is key here.
Absolutely. Roy encourages leaders to be humble, to acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, to actively seek input from others, to create a culture where everyone feels safe to speak up, share their perspectives.
That makes sense? Breaking down those hierarchies, creating a more open and collaborative environment.
She also explores how different leadership styles play out in the context of this iceberg of ignorance. Autocratic leaders, those who make decisions unilaterally, they're particularly vulnerable to this.
If you're not seeking input, you're likely to be operating on incomplete information.
Right. And she points out that even democratic leadership can fall into this trap if the team isn't diverse or if there's a culture of groupthink. You need those dissenting voices, those different perspectives to challenge assumptions.
So it's not just about the leadership style, it's about the culture, the environment you create. A culture of openness, transparency, psychological safety, making it okay to disagree.
Exactly. And then she talks about transformational leadership.
That's often associated with some of the most effective leaders, right? Those who can inspire and empower others.
Right. And Roy believes that transformational leaders are well positioned to overcome this iceberg of ignorance because they prioritize building relationships, fostering open communication, creating that culture of trust and respect.
So it's about creating an environment where people feel valued, heard, empowered to contribute their best work.
And to guide group decision-making, she turns to two powerful frameworks: systems thinking and game theory.
We've talked about systems thinking, but I'm really intrigued by this idea of applying game theory to group decision-making.
It's fascinating. She specifically mentions Nash equilibrium, signaling games, incentive alignment, coalition formation, game trees, all these concepts from game theory that can be really helpful in understanding group dynamics.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with game theory. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. So Nash equilibrium, that's a concept that describes a state of balance in a game where no player can improve their outcome by changing their strategy, assuming everyone else stays the same, like a stalemate where everyone's doing the best they can given the circumstances.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that could apply to group decision-making. Everyone's trying to get the best outcome for themselves, but they also have to consider how their choices will impact others.
Exactly. And then there are signaling games, which are all about the strategic exchange of information. Players use signals to convey their intentions, their capabilities. It's about being aware of the messages you're sending, even unintentionally.
So it's about communication, but on a deeper level, understanding the unspoken dynamics at play.
Right. And then there's incentive alignment, making sure that the rewards and penalties are aligned with the overall goals of the group.
So you're not creating a situation where people are rewarded for behaving in ways that undermine the team.
Exactly. And coalition formation, that's about how groups come together to achieve common goals, even if they have different interests.
Finding that common ground, building alliances.
And finally, game trees. Visual representations of the different paths a strategic interaction can take. like a roadmap of choices and potential consequences. It can help groups make more informed decisions.
Wow, I'm really impressed with how Roy has integrated these game theory concepts into her approach. It brings a whole new level of strategic thinking to group decision-making. So what's her final takeaway?
She reminds us that group decision-making isn't just about reaching a consensus. It's about making sure that the decision is implemented effectively, that everyone's aligned and committed to making it work.
Right. A decision is only as good as its execution.
Exactly. She emphasizes clear communication, assigning roles and responsibilities, setting expectations, providing support, monitoring progress, making adjustments.
So it's about having a plan and then making sure everyone's on board and equipped to make it happen.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the neuroscience of decision-making to group dynamics, risk management, dealing with uncertainty. It's amazing how interconnected all these concepts are. It really highlights the complexity of leadership and the beauty of it. It's challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding to be able to navigate these complexities and make a positive impact. And the great thing is, we don't have to do it alone. We have this amazing community, the BIM Heroes community, where we can learn from each other, support each other, share best practices. And of course, there's the BIMHero.io Leadership Development Program, a fantastic resource for anyone looking to enhance their leadership skills. It's free, it's structured, it's supportive, and it's a great way to connect with like-minded professionals. So if you're feeling inspired to step up your leadership game, definitely check it out.
Couldn't agree more. And if you want to keep learning, keep growing, be sure to subscribe to BIM Heroes Radio on YouTube and Spotify. We've got more great episodes coming up exploring all facets of leadership in the AEC industry. So as we wrap up this deep dive on decision-making and problem-solving, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What if the most important decision we make isn't about the specific problem we're facing, but about the kind of leader we choose to be in those moments? How do we show up? How do we navigate those challenges? What values do we bring to the table?
Those are great questions to reflect on, because ultimately our choices as leaders shape not only the outcomes of our projects, but the culture of our organizations, and maybe even the future of our industry. So as you face those tough decisions, remember, you have a choice. Choose to lead with courage, with compassion, with integrity, and with that commitment to excellence.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading.